Today is the first day of the November 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. The first thing we usually talk about at the beginning of a retreat, particularly when there are so many new people here, but it's always beneficial for all of us to bring it back to mind and look at it, is how one listens to a talk. What is listening on an occasion like this? And the whole question about who is Toni, what is she, a teacher, an authority, a guide, the question comes up all the time, not just for new people, but for people who've come here for a long time. It is an unresolved thing what Toni is, and assumes importance because it is unresolved. So I want to talk about that. What I am, or if I have to be anything, because that would resolve the problem immediately. I didn't have to be anything in the mind, but it is a problem for many people, so we'll talk about it. And what is our relationship with each other? As we start this retreat, as we look into relationship, and then maybe go on to questions that people have asked, one of them being, what do you mean by asking questions? I want to have an answer, but why ask a question if there's no answer? So we'll go into those things too if there's time. But most important right now, what is listening? Listening to a talk that is being given right now, not that talk not given on the basis of any planned structure, outline. Still at this moment, I don't know what I'm going to say the next moment. So it is not a prepared lecture designed to convey information to the listener like academic or educational lectures are usually like, conveying information for the audience to absorb, to commit to memory, to be repeated, and to be graded for. If one repeats it well, one gets a good grade. One has remembered it excellently well, one does well in school. This is not what this talk and this listening here is all about. It may be remembered, it may not be remembered, but that's not the crucial thing. The crucial thing is listening in an openness that has no motive to remember, to accumulate, to hold on to. Can we start out like this? Right from the beginning, to listen without trying to grab onto something, grab onto it with agreement or disagreement, bringing comparison to bear on what she says, comparing with what someone else said. It compares favorably or unfavorably. Then the mind is busy in all its various compartments. The comparison compartment, and the agreement department, and the disagreement department. And it's not undividedly open to listen. Can one listen so openly that the calling of the crows is also there, someone breathing, someone moving, maybe the wind rustling whatever leaves remain in the trees, or the branches squeaking, that's also there in this kind of open listening. The listening is not exclusively focused in a concentrative effort. More than that, there is also an openness to look at whether what is being said is actually so. To wonder about it. The listening is a wondering listening, in which one doesn't already know yes or no, but is open to finding out this instant or whenever a discovery may happen. Yes, this is so, or I don't see it that way. I can't see it. What is she talking about? And then to leave it open, not because one doesn't understand what she's talking about, to dismiss it, to reject it, resist it. I remember early in my reading, which became interested in questions of meaning of life, I read many authors, many different traditions, including psychological traditions and philosophical traditions. And there was a lot I didn't understand, but there was something which I faintly noticed even at the time. I wasn't hassling with it too much. I left it there, didn't understand it, and something struck me profoundly. Didn't understand it, yet it struck me profoundly. I wondered, what does this mean? But it wasn't rejected. It was sort of kept someplace in a loose suspense file in the brain. And it surfaced at times. And at times, yes, this is what was meant by this author. It was clear. With which I'm not requesting that people agree with me and not reject things. If you feel like rejecting it, then do. And if you bring it to a meeting, that's what meetings are for looking at disagreements or maybe misunderstandings. That is another thing to pay attention to, how we listen and so easily distort something that is being said due to the set in which the brain is programmed to hear things. One may hear that Toni says, do this and don't do that, and she doesn't say that. But the brain is programmed in do's and don'ts. And therefore, when something is said that sounds negative, it's already interpreted to mean don't do this negative thing. At the moment this is happening, and there's no awareness it's happening, and something is misremembered, misinterpreted, misunderstood. And unless it is brought up in dialogue or discussion with me during a retreat or with other people, it may never be clarified. It may sit there as a misunderstanding. That's why it's so immensely valuable to talk about things that seem hard to comprehend or to bring it up, if one wishes to do that. There's no requirement for any of this to take place, but there's a possibility for it. So not to buy what I'm saying wholesale, not to buy any of it. It needs to be found out. Whether it is so, it needs to be seen directly. I cannot see for anyone else. The seeing here, the looking, the seeing can be clear. And the words that come out of this clear seeing can also be clear words. But understanding clear words intellectually is still not seeing what they point to, what they are expressing. To see that directly, the mind has to be open and unattached to any point of view, any position that one is identified with for dear life. And not to be identified with a position needs seeing that one is identified, if one is. If that isn't seen, it operates darkly, blindly, automatically, and then is being justified by this brain. This is why it's such a difficult work, because we have so many rationalizations, so many justifications and validations for our beliefs and opinions. Because they are us, they are me. I'm identified with that. I rise or fall with that. And I only want to rise, I don't want to fall. So when somebody questions something, it is immediately felt as a slight or severe disturbance, experienced as a disturbance. And we don't want to be disturbed, and yet we come here. And if you come into this room at this time, you may be disturbed by what is being said. But disturbance also means a loosening of rigidity, a loosening of the cocoon, the encasement that holds us, separate from each other and in darkness and narrowness within, in conflict with the world. That encasement, the cracking of it may feel as a disturbance, but will one find out what is really so disturbing? Is one interested in finding out about this process of learning about oneself in other than conventional ways? Conventional ways, I mean here, gathering information, psychological, philosophical, metaphysical, religious information about oneself. What other authorities and traditions and research projects have come up with about the human being, and accumulating that information as knowledge about myself, which may have some place. We're not saying this is bad. We're not saying anything is bad or good. We're looking at it. We're questioning. We're questioning whether knowledge about ourselves provides for an opening, or whether it provides for more encasement in what I know and identification with it. The more I know about myself, the more knowledgeable a person I am, and therefore I may get more respect, admiration, money from people if I'm in that field. Therefore I need to hold on to this. I can't question it. I think I need to hold on to it, because from this rigid idea about myself, or the whole structure of ideas of what I am, comes tremendous conflict and tremendous sorrow, tremendous pain, the pain of hurt, of insecurity. If somebody doesn't take me or accept me for what I want to represent, I feel hurt, threatened, endangered. I have to patch the crumbling structure, keep it up, afraid somebody else may outdo me in knowledge, admiration by others, or The whole thing has dangers with it and pains and constant need for repair and maintenance. What I'm referring to is ideas about what I am, what I want others to take me for or address me as, treat me as. So, is it possible in listening to look at this too? Get glimpses into this? How one protects oneself, fortifies oneself, clings to memories of what one is, has been, and the projection of what one wants to be. A tremendous identification with all of these ideas of oneself. Can one be open to look and leave it open? Because some of these things only reveal themselves when we talk with each other, are in relationship with each other. Then we get so easily hurt or flattered, and therefore clinging to people or rejecting them. Is this something one can begin to explore? This tremendous safety shield that we human beings have built around ourselves. Clinging to it and at the same time suffering from separation from each other, from isolation, from other human beings. One person this morning told me, working in a big city, I don't feel related to the people I live with. In the subway or bus or whatever means of transportation is taken to the place of work, people sit next to each other out of contact with each other. Each one is reading. We don't know each other. We don't talk to each other. And then wondering, well, couldn't one talk to the person? Well, does one talk to someone who's reading? One may disturb that person. Person may not want any contact. There is safety in this involvement in the written page. Some safety. For a moment forgetting about all one's problems with people and the world. In this private space that reading provides. And that feels like an intrusion if this private space of reading is invaded by someone sitting next to one in the bus. As though my house was entered. I'm just looking at it. So is one interested in exploring this? And if there is this interest, then there will be the energy to look and listen and find things out. And the crumbling of walls, even though it may feel as an insecurity and disturbance at the beginning, but that can be investigated too. What is disturbance? What is so disturbing? And sit with that whole thing, or walk with it, work with it. Not afraid to allow it to open up, to reveal itself in all its depth and complexity, connection with the past, with past disturbances, past fears and pains or angers. Will one allow the time and space for this? It reminds me, I too need to allow time, not talk too fast, have pauses where one can look and listen quietly. So what function does Toni, who's sitting here, have in all of this? talking. I've been talking for I don't know how many minutes. And there's a microphone here. There are people sitting around, maybe looking inside, maybe looking at me. I'm usually not looking at people while I'm giving a talk. What is our relationship? What do you see me as? Or what do you project onto me? Is that worthwhile looking at? I used to say at this point in a retreat talk, first retreat talk, that I am not a teacher. I haven't said this anymore in a long time, or even though I just said it. But the reason I brought it up again is that there are people who say I'm denying this, but I am a teacher. And that denial is not something open and straightforward. So I will address this again because it has come up again. The reason why I don't use that word teacher, even though you are free to use it, you can use any word to describe me to yourselves. If you bring it up to question, then we'll look at it together. The reason I have not used this word is because I'm not engaged in what teachers conventionally are engaged in, conveying information, belief systems, dogma. Projecting images which have been traditionally defined, passed down maybe over centuries. Not expecting any particular formalities in our getting together. Except if you come in, we can say good morning, how are you? Or good afternoon, or a beautiful evening. That's the only reason I say that. I'm not denying that I'm sitting here talking and that these talks are being taped and sent to people who are ordering them. I'm doing that, and it is possible to do that without thinking of myself as assuming any particular role that can be defined or described in any conventional way. In looking at it, the less there is of any definition, the freer the looking and talking and expressing can be. One has not got to conform to any image handed down or imposed this moment. And this is what we suffer from so much, don't we? Having to conform to images that are imposed upon us by family, society, culture, tradition, and the conflict that we often feel. We want to act what we call spontaneously, but we have to act according to a role. Of course, there are rewards for acting according to a role because we get treated in a certain way which may give us feelings of energy, appreciation, love, and what have you. And one may depend on that. And therefore not wish to question this whole thing. But here, if you come here for this period of time during a retreat, we will question whatever comes up. Not in order to become good debaters or dialoguers, but to see if there can be freedom from the frozenness of habit, from the automaticness of our conditioning, which we're not aware of most of the time. It's the insidious thing about conditioning. It masquerades for awareness, can masquerade for awareness. For being conscious. We feel we human beings are conscious in comparison to the animals who are not conscious, can't think, therefore we have something. But we're blind to our prides, our ideas about ourselves and each other, and how they shape and affect our relationship to the point of making war on each other and killing each other. That comes out of ideas about each other, doesn't it? So here one person is talking, and yet in ever so close and intimate touch with whoever's here, and not just in this building. Because what is being talked about and looked at, questioned and expressed is what goes on in this human mind, in all of us. To bring it to the light of day, to let it be seen with an insight which is not just more knowledge. It so quickly becomes knowledge and can be repeated, remembered. But the moment of insight is not knowledge. It's seeing something, seeing the truth of what is going on this moment. One thought arousing fear throughout the body, or hatred, or anger, or affection, desire. To see that happening, actually. One needs to study no books about this. It is happening from moment to moment, and can be seen and learned as we go. And one person here talks about this, not to propagate a dogma, a belief, but to say, look, this is what's happening. Can you see it too? Can we see it together at this time or at any time? And if we see it together, then there is no distance or line of division between us. Then we're looking and listening in the same dimension, in the same place. Use whatever word. The words are not adequate. They aren't the real thing. So if there is this openness of looking what is going on this moment or at any time in human beings, if that opening happens in us, then the problem of teacher and student collapses, is irrelevant. It doesn't apply. But if we don't see directly, then we erect ideas about the other person being a teacher and me being a student, or whatever designations we are attracted to or find adequate. Sometimes the question is raised, well, why are you the only one then who is talking? Why don't other people talk? Well, lots of people are talking. There are more and more centers growing up all over this country, all over Europe. And there are people there who are talking. And one is free to go any place one wishes to. Or start one's own center. There's no hold here, no pressure on people to follow a path of accomplishment or of development and advancement. Either one sees what is so or one doesn't. And if one begins to see, then one begins to talk with people. Remember the first time something happened to me that I remember right now is when, I think I've mentioned it before, but there are new people here, and maybe the story will sound a little bit different. We had just adopted this little baby, Ralph. He was 3 weeks old or so, 4 weeks, and dutifully, like a mother, full of ideas of all the things she has to do to a baby. I was burping this baby, whatever that means, patting him on the back very mechanically. And he was not burping very willingly or happily. He didn't. Eventually, the doctor told me, put him down on his stomach and he'll burp himself, which he did. Well, here I was in this darkish room holding this baby. It was nice holding him, but I was trying to accomplish the burping task. And suddenly something happened which brought the freeing realization that I didn't have to do anything, that there was not him and me, that everything was easy and natural. These sound like ideas, but what happened was not an idea. It was something else. A breakdown of all this idea of what I have to do, what I am, what he is, what he should be done to. That was all not there. And therefore the world and oneself was open and friendly and full of a joyous energy. So I couldn't wait for my husband to come home to tell him that. I don't know what he made of my enthusiasm, because the story didn't sound like much. But the reason I'm mentioning it here is that when something happens, something is clear, we do want to communicate to another human being. We want to share that, talk about it. And then we talk with great strength because it is so. We see it, we're seeing it. It's happening or it's happened. The danger comes when one wants to get that moment back, or wants to retrieve everything that one did up to this moment and begin to burp babies all the time in order to have that again. This is what we do. This sounds absurd, but brain making these cause and effect relationships. What happened before that, then that happened, and I have to keep doing what I did before in order for that other to happen. And then we get into trouble. So, why am I doing this here and the only one in this building? Because this is how we're doing it right now. Maybe eventually it'll change. I don't know. The people who come here and the person who's talking here are not separate from each other. And we're not separate from all the rest of the people who are not coming here either. We're hanging together as one moving whole, moving, interrelated, interconnecting whole. It may be a beautiful idea, but I don't mean it as an idea, I mean it as an actual fact. It is so, and it's for each one to come upon himself, herself. And when that is clear and operating, then there's no problem with doing something, even though it is misunderstood. No problem in talking, even if one has never felt before one was a public speaker, or a teacher for that matter. One has never wanted to be a teacher or public speaker. It just is happening. And I'm not denying that it is happening. If you have more questions about this, do bring it. Because an unclarified thing can sort of be a constant grinding away, maybe subconsciously at times. And it's like a dry sponge absorbing energies. But when something is clarified, then the energy does not have to keep feeding a dry sponge. Also, I'm learning when people tell me things. I'm just as interested in all of this as everyone else is. Maybe not, but I am. So what is our relationship after all of these many words? Can it be a relationship without images about each other? So we're free to look at each other, listen to each other, learn from each other, like two human beings filled with friendliness for each other. Or if there's anger, you can mention to a good friend that you're angry, can't you? And he or she will listen. What I'm saying this for is not to think I have to come to her as with friendly feelings when one may feel anything but friendly feelings. Often people come into meetings and say, I'm very angry, I was very angry with you. And I think it's such a wonderful thing a person feels free to say that, express it, look at it, be open about it, and maybe already in expressing it and looking at it with energy, two people. Then what happens to anger? One has to find out. One can't predict. And we're not in the prediction business. Particularly in traveling where you haven't been before. You will see in people's eyes the idea they have about you. And then you can see that the relationship is not complete. I may feel open and wanting to share something, talk about something, but I can see the person sees me as an authority, maybe a venerated authority. And then it's not a complete open relationship. But we have been trained this way, we have been conditioned. So it needs to be seen. It needs to come into full awareness, the blast of it. And when the image blasts, then there are just two human beings. Even though that expression is too much too. We're talking with each other. And the sun is rising, lighting up the branches without leaves in a deep orange. That's there. I think in looking at the news, hearing about what is happening everywhere where people are in conflict with each other, in armed confrontation, terrorizing each other, controlling each other, dominating each other. There's always images involved about who this other is. The very devil. The enemy. The immoral one. And both sides or all sides talk in the same way about the other side. And because of these images that we nurture and the media, the government, the religions nurture in us the images of the heathen, of the unholy one, the uninitiated one, the heretic. Because of the nurturance of these images, we are capable of arousing energy to fight and kill, throw people out of their homes, rob them, kill them. So the problem of imagery does not only separate us here if you have projections of authority, teachership, whatever. And if I see you as a student who has a long way to go, these ideas, you see what they do to us? They affect our way of being with each other. It starts on the smallest individual level between you and me, and draws its dangerous, destructive circles all over the world because of things like this happening between you and me, the image making, the ability of mental image to arouse the body, to abandon all reason and fight and kill or hate, band together in hatred groups. And if we don't track this in this mind, it operates in us. Right now, a political campaign is going on. Before coming here during my off period, I see some news. It's amazing what people can do right now with just the image of taxes, taxpayer, somebody robbing the taxpayer, the in guys, the incumbents. The camera would take you maybe to a tavern or a restaurant where people sit together, and the candidate throws some of these words around and people are aroused. Or the people are aroused and the candidate knows what words to use to arouse some more people. And not aroused to seeing something, but to get hatred and antagonism going, and then get a vote out of it for someone else. This is this mind here that is encapsulated in this skull. It's capable of all of this. It's doing it. Get this body going alone and in groups and in masses, to do things that are not only destructive of other human beings, but of this environment, natural environment. So can one see the importance of tracking this and becoming clear, so one is not deceived by these mechanisms which are mechanically operating in the human brain, have been for thousands of years. Image making and the connection between image and all the physiological centers of this body, all the glands and organs and muscles are connected to the thinking and image making process, and to past thoughts. Because what we've thought in the past is also a program now. And what other people around us have thought is a program that can be evoked at any time, and that program responds. We say, I respond, but it's the program that responds. The conditioned program responds to someone saying such and such a thing. And we say, I'm responding, and I'm therefore like this, and he or she who said this is like that. But it was his or her program that challenged this program. It may feel eerie to see each other just as programs responding to each other, but if we watch a little bit in ourselves and on the news, people around us and how we relate, maybe this will become clearer. That this is actually so. Don't buy it. Test it. Find it out. And not to get depressed over it. That's also the reaction to the idea, oh my God, I'm only a programmed computer. Well, one says this often enough, or maybe just once, to oneself, and one feels pretty miserable. Says, I don't want to hear that person talk anymore. Makes me so depressed. But what can be discovered is how one way of putting it can already affect the whole organism. But to discover what this way of putting it actually refers to, namely responding so automatically to someone who has just said something that hurts my feelings, insults my pride, or seems to humiliate me. That's what the program thinks. There it is, the anger, the hurt, the urge to retaliate or to withdraw. It's all there to be watched quietly, without having any conclusion about it, which would have further impact on this organism. Am I saying too much too fast at one time? We have said it many times before, maybe put a little bit differently. And here is another warning. When something sounds as though one had heard it before, the brain so quickly will say, oh, I know that, I don't need to listen to that. That's her old line. And listen to some inner line, some fantasy or so, just not listening to what is being said. But it doesn't matter how often before it has been said. What matters immensely at any moment is that there is the openness of listening and looking. That is what matters, not what it is that is being said. Do you see that? So to be on guard with this mechanism that says, oh, this is old stuff. It's just like saying, oh, I know this is a flower and therefore not looking at this, whatever it is. We don't know what it is. We have to look. The word or the remembrance is dead stuff. In talking during these coming 6 days or so, I think I mentioned it last night, I will be using questions that people have brought up in meetings or comments that they have made, that you have made. I do not remember verbatim what someone said, and I have very little time to write it down. I can only jot down a few, often for me, illegible words. So I have to rely on incomplete memory of how somebody put it. And then also it happens that many people have very similar questions at similar times. So the question that is brought up in a talk may be a composite of several different questions. So please don't feel misquoted or misunderstood when you don't recognize your own question verbatim. And you may not remember it either. The other thing that's possible, and it happened quite a lot in Europe, and I suggested it was very convenient. I asked if a person has a question to write it down and leave it with me, then I don't have to jot things down just while one person leaves the room and another one comes in. I have the question. That work is saved and it's more accurate. So if you feel like it and remember it, I appreciate if you have your question written down. If not, we'll all make do with what the memory provides. If there's ever anything, and that happens every once in a while, that you want under no circumstances be discussed in a talk, then please say this to me and it will not be brought up. And all of this talk about questions does not mean that in order to have a meeting, you have to bring a question. You don't have to bring anything. What is oneself if one brings nothing and takes away nothing? Which means one is nothing, just whatever comes up this moment. No need to fix an image about it, a label, a name. Labels and names have their function. If we address each other verbally or by letter, we have to have a name. If you talk to somebody about a person who's giving a talk, you may want to have a designation, a description or definition of this person. So there's a function in communicating. But can one be very clear where this label interferes in our whole process of clear perception? Makes it impossible to perceive clearly if we already fix the label onto a person, have an image sitting there, projecting on top of what is actually going on. Can one explore the truth of that, or maybe find it's false, but explore it? Find out as one goes. We will end here for today.